David's eyes, although faded by age, still retained a penetrating gleam, a remnant of more vigorous days. Now, at 78, the wrinkles on his face were like marks on a map, telling stories of joys and, more often, sorrows. At the height of his life, David was a dedicated engineer, involved in calculations and projects that promised bridges and buildings. However, professional success rarely translated into family presence. His two children, Marco and Scarlett, grew up more familiar with their nanny and grandparents than with their own parents. David, absorbed by his obligations, missed his first steps, his first words, and his first days at school. Before he knew it, parent-teacher conferences were just another appointment in his busy schedule. David's wife, Hannah, died when their children were still teenagers, a loss that should have united the family, but which only widened the gulf between them, causing David to sink even deeper into work. The years passed, and communication became increasingly sporadic and cold. Sunday lunches were replaced by birthday cards and short, awkward video calls. The decision to move to the nursing home was more his children's than his own. After a minor accident at home, Marco and Scarlett were convinced that David could no longer live alone. That day, David felt the weight of age and loneliness for the first time in his life as he signed the papers transferring him to the Home for the Quiet, a name that sounded both ironic and bleak to him. Lar dos Sossegados was an old building, with exposed brick walls and a garden that, although well kept, always seemed to be in the shade, as if time had passed it by. The asylum smelled of cleaning products and something undefinable that David decided must be the odor of decay. His room, a cubicle with a single bed, a bedside table and a chair, was less a home and more a reminder of his situation, abandoned and forgotten. In his first days at the asylum, David spent long hours looking out of his bedroom window, observing the garden where silent old men strolled at a slow pace while holding a column or reading out-of-date newspapers. Bitter thoughts often visited him. He remembered the times when he could have been a better father, wondered if his career choices had really paid off. Loneliness was a constant companion, made worse by the conviction that he would never see his children again, that the initial visit to settle him in would be his last. He felt more bitter than ever before, as if he had now finally disconnected from the automatic pilot that had ruled his life. And precisely because of this, instead of socializing with others, he completely isolated himself in his own world, giving no space for anyone else to enter it. David's days at the Home of the Quiet followed an oppressive monotony. He woke up early, as he had always done during his working years. But now the morning brought no promises of projects or problems to solve, just empty hours stretching endlessly in front of him. His breakfast was eaten almost in silence in the large dining room, where the whispered conversations of the other residents barely masked the incessant sound of cutlery against plates. After breakfast, he walked slowly through the garden, but he saw no beauty there. For David, every step was a reminder of his loneliness. He used to sit on a bench facing the small pond, watching the ducks who seemed to be the only ones enjoying their prison. The carers were kind, always with a smile on their face and encouraging words, but for David, their interactions were mere reminders of his dependency and the loss of his old life. "Good morning, Mr. David. How are you feeling today?"
I'm fine, Sophie.
Snorted David, without much humor. "If you need anything, just call. We're having live music this afternoon. I hope to see you there." "Maybe I will, if there's nothing better to do." Ironized. These conversations, although well-meaning, made David feel even more distant from his previous life, where he was needed, where his presence had a purpose. Inside the sterile room he now called home, David often lost himself in thought. He reflected on his children, Marco and Scarlett, with whom communication had become increasingly sporadic. In moments of deep loneliness, he hoped to see them again, to explain his faults, to share his regrets, and perhaps rekindle the bonds that had frayed over the years. Sometimes he found himself thinking, do they still think about me? Would they understand if I told them how I really feel here? Abandoned, but still full of love for them. One afternoon, while watching a family visiting another resident, David felt a pang of envy and sadness, wishing it was Marco and Scarlett there with him. This wish was accompanied by a mixture of hope and despair, a desire to reconnect and the fear of being forgotten for good. And all this was leaving him feeling more and more destroyed, closed off and bitter. A few weeks after David's arrival at the Home for the Quiet, a new resident appeared, bringing with her a wave of freshness and a vibrant presence that contrasted sharply with the dull atmosphere of the nursing home. Her name was Helena, a 75-year-old woman, her eyes lively, full of an almost childlike curiosity, as if now in her old age she could replicate the same enthusiasm for the world as when she was a child. She carried with her an easy smile and a disposition that seemed to defy her age. David and Helena met for the first time in the cafeteria at lunchtime. Helena, always looking for company, chose to sit next to David, who usually ate alone, lost in his own dark thoughts. "Can I sit here? You seem to have found the best place to look at the garden." She commented unpretentiously. "Oh, yes, of course. It's all yours." He replied, stepping aside. "You're David, right?" She said, reading the badge around his neck.
I'm Helena.
"I heard you'd arrived not long ago. So, how are you settling into our mansion of the glorious golden years?" David shrugged, a bitter smile appearing on his lips. Then he commented, not daring to look her in the face. "You seem happy to be here." "Oh dear, I'm trying. But, you see, life is too short to live in the shadows, don't you think? We need to look for the light, wherever it may be." David, who had long been hiding in a shell of resignation and melancholy, felt as if a tremor had created a tiny crack in the shell he had created. Over the next few days, although David tried to remain isolated, he was caught out by Helena's surprising liveliness, as she insisted on trying to talk to him, even when he rejected any kind of closeness. Helena, on the other hand, didn't seem to mind at all the almost monologues she had to engage in, and because of her insistence they began to share more and more moments together. Slow walks along the stone paths in the garden, games of chess and afternoon tea. Helena, with her infectious enthusiasm and astonishing obstinacy, slowly began to break down the barriers David had built around himself. One day, as they watched the sunset tint the sky orange and purple, she said something that shook him. "David, you never talk about your family. I understand if it's painful." David felt a twinge in his stomach, and with visible hesitation said, "My children, well, they decided it was best for me to be here. I miss them, of course, but I also feel that I failed them. You know, we are not defined only by our mistakes. You're still here. You can still love. You can still be part of the world. Maybe it's time to forgive, more yourself than anyone else." Some people feel they don't deserve forgiveness, so they walk away quietly, into empty spaces. David listened attentively, but didn't answer anything. As the days went by, Helena's presence became a constant source of comfort for David. What began as monologues almost whispered into the wind, quickly turned into daily encounters, as David began to look forward to meeting Helena. And Helena, with her liveliness and genuine interest, gradually managed to draw David out of his shell of introspection and resignation. They began to share meals, take part in nursing home activities together, and spend long afternoons discussing books, music, and their past lives. Helena's energy was contagious, and even the nursing home staff noticed a noticeable change in David's mood. One particularly clear afternoon, as they watched the sun set, painting the sky gold and pink, David decided to open his heart about his children. "Helena, I've been thinking a lot lately about my children. I still can't forgive myself. Don't you think they miss you too?" she asked. "You have to forgive yourself so that others can." "I'd like to believe so, but their silence is deafening. I don't know if I'll ever be able to put things right. Maybe it's not a question of fixing, but of understanding and accepting. And maybe, with time, they'll come to see that too." As the months passed, David and Helena became practically inseparable. Friendship gradually gave way to something deeper, a serene and mature love that neither of them had expected to find at this stage in their lives. They were taken by surprise by their own feelings, which they thought could no longer exist. David, who had resigned himself to a lonely existence, found in Helena a reason to truly smile again, and through her he found the strength to forgive himself for the mistakes of the past. He finally felt that he had undone the bonds he had wrapped himself in for so long, and now he was ready to live again. One morning, as they walked through the garden, David suddenly stopped, looked into Helena's eyes, and, in a soft voice, confessed his feelings. "Helena, I didn't think it was possible, but you've brought joy to my days again. I love you. In a way I thought I'd forgotten how. David, my darling, I love you too. It's a gift to be able to share my days with you." Driven by this new love, David and Helena decided to get married. They wanted to celebrate this new chapter in their lives, to show everyone that, regardless of age, love could flourish. And also that loneliness, or the feeling of being alone, didn't really have to be experienced. You just had to walk and find the good feelings again. The news of the wedding spread throughout the nursing home, bringing a new vigor to the community. Everyone wanted to take part and help in some way, turning the event into a real community celebration, with residents and staff contributing enthusiastically. The activities hall, usually used for bingo and other meetings, was chosen as the venue for the ceremony. The women of the nursing home's craft club took charge of the decorations, creating garlands of fabric flowers and colorful table arrangements. Helena chose a simple but elegant dress, which one of the asylum's seamstresses offered to adjust. David, for his part, decided to wear a classic suit that he had kept from more formal days, bringing a sense of renewal to his usual image. On the day of the wedding, the hall was filled with flowers, laughter, and music. A resident pianist from the nursing home offered to play the couple's favorite songs, and an atmosphere of genuine joy filled the air. As Helena walked down the makeshift aisle, supported by a dear friend, David was waiting for her with a smile that lit up his whole face. The ceremony was simple but deeply emotional, with promises of companionship and unconditional love. The exchange of vows was a moment of tears and smiles as they declared their love and commitment to each other. What David didn't know was that Sophie, one of the nursing home's most attentive carers, had managed to get in touch with Marco and Scarlett to tell them about the wedding. Moved by the news and the reality of their father finding love at this stage of his life, they decided to surprise him and attend the ceremony. When David and Helena turned to be introduced as husband and wife, the entrance of Marco and Scarlett caused a murmur of surprise. David, on seeing them, felt a mixture of shock and joy. "Marco, Scarlett, you've come? Dad, we wanted to be here for you. I'm sorry for everything. Perhaps we acted more out of anger than forgiveness. Dad, we're here to start again, if you'll let us." The reconciliation was touching, with hugs and tears shared. Helena, with a radiant smile, welcomed them both as if they were her own children. The reception was a real celebration, with food, dancing, and many stories being shared throughout the afternoon. Marco and Scarlett mingled with David and Helena's friends, listening to stories about how their love had inspired an entire community. The residents of the nursing home, many of whom had felt forgotten or left behind by their families, found that celebration a reminder that it's never too late for new beginnings, and that love can find a way even in the most unexpected places. David and Helena lived happily together in the hospice until the end of their lives, dying happily just a few days apart. Thank you very much to those who have supported the channel financially through the link in the comment pinned. This helps me to bring more and more stories to you. And don't forget to like and also subscribe to continue receiving the new stories.